You want to know what really happens when an Amish person crosses that line before marriage? Not the romanticized version, not the movie version, the real one. The version people in my community never talked about out loud, but everybody silently lived with. My name is Sarah. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in a tight knit, old order Amish community. I left when I was 18 years old, and today I am going to tell you exactly what happens, what is expected, and what the consequences truly look like when intimacy happens before marriage inside the Amish world. Let me start by painting you a picture of where I came from. In Lancaster County, our entire life was built around the church and the Ordnung. The Ordnung is basically an unwritten code of rules that governs everything about how you live, what you wear, what you drive, who you talk to, and absolutely everything about how you conduct yourself around the opposite sex. From the time you are old enough to understand, you are taught one thing clearly: sex is for marriage only. It is for procreation inside the bond of a husband and wife. That is it. That is the beginning and the end of the conversation. There is no sex education in Amish schools. None. Children learn about reproduction by watching farm animals, whispering with friends, or piecing things together on their own. The adults around you simply do not talk about it. Now, here is where things get complicated, because the Amish are human beings, and young people, no matter what culture they come from, have the same natural feelings and curiosity as everyone else. So, how does the community try to manage that? They have this tradition, and it is called bundling, or in some places, bed courtship. I know that sounds shocking to outsiders, and honestly, looking back now, it shocks me too. When a young man courts a young woman, he would come to her home after a Sunday singing. These are the gatherings where Amish young people meet. He would come in, remove his shoes, his hat, his outer shirt, and come upstairs to the girl's bedroom, and they would lie together in the same bed, fully clothed, and the expectation was that they would talk, get to know each other, maybe kiss and embrace, what the Amish call schmunzling, but they were absolutely not supposed to go any further than that. This tradition goes back to our Anabaptist ancestors in Europe, when couples hid in upstairs rooms while being persecuted by authorities. A board was placed down the middle of the bed to keep them separated. By the time it came to Pennsylvania, the board was mostly gone, but the practice stayed, and I can tell you from people I knew personally, as well as from stories shared openly in my community, the intention and the reality were not always the same thing. Premarital intimacy did happen, maybe not as openly as in the outside world, but it happened. And when it did, there was a system in place to deal with it, a very specific and very serious system. Here is how it worked. If a couple had been baptized into the church and they had been intimate before marriage, they could not simply get married and move on. Before they were granted permission by the church elders to marry, they were asked directly whether they had remained free from sin during their courtship. If the answer was no, or if a pregnancy made the answer obvious for them, they were required to make a public confession in front of the entire church congregation. Everyone, your family, your neighbors, people you have known your whole life, you would stand or kneel before the assembled church and confess what you had done. The shame of that moment is something that people in my community described in ways I cannot fully put into words. It was not a quiet conversation with a bishop. It was witnessed, it was communal, and that was entirely the point. Now, if a girl became pregnant before marriage, things moved very fast. The goal of the community was always to get that couple married before the pregnancy became visible to others. If they were already baptized members of the church, the wedding was moved up and the public confession would come as part of that process. But if one or both of them had not yet been baptized into the church, which is required before marriage, they had to rush through the entire baptism process. Normally, joining the church takes from spring through fall, attending instruction classes every 2 weeks. But in these situations, a young person could attend classes at 2 different church districts simultaneously, cutting that time in half. Everything was designed to manage appearances and bring the situation back under the control of the community as quickly as possible. And I want you to understand something important here. The whole system, the bundling, the courtship rules, the rushed confessions, the forced timeline, it was not designed to truly protect young people. A former Amish woman and author named Saloma Miller Furlong, who also grew up in a community that practiced bed courtship, once wrote something that has stayed with me. She said that Amish elders would rather a young woman become pregnant before marriage than leave the community, because pregnancy before marriage could be dealt with, leaving could not. A pregnancy led to a confession, a hasty wedding, and the girl stayed. A girl who leaves takes herself, her future children, and her independence away from everything the community has built. And if someone did break the rules, refused to confess, refused to comply, and had already been baptized into the church, the ultimate consequence was shunning. In German, it is called Maidong. This is not just being left out of a social circle. This is your family no longer eating at the same table as you, your neighbors refusing to do business with you, people who have known you your entire life being forbidden from normal social contact with you. It is a form of social death, and it is meant to pressure the person into returning to obedience. Many people who have been shunned describe it as one of the most psychologically painful experiences a human being can go through. I want to be clear about something. Not every Amish community handles these things the same way. There are more than 350,000 Amish people living in over 600 distinct communities across North America. New Order Amish communities tend to be more progressive in their courtship rules and often do not practice bed courtship at all. Old Order communities, like the one I grew up in, were generally stricter, but the underlying belief is consistent across all of them. Intimacy before marriage is a sin, and that sin has consequences that are deeply communal, deeply public, and deeply designed to keep you inside the boundaries of the church. I am not here to tell you that the Amish are bad people. I am not. The community I grew up in had genuine love, genuine faith, and genuine care for one another. But there are things inside that system that deserve to be looked at honestly. The silence around sexuality, the shame-based response when nature does what nature does, the way young people are put in situations designed to test them and then publicly punished when they fail the test. I lived inside that world, and I believe that if you are going to understand the Amish, you need to understand this part too, because these are not outsiders making accusations. These are the lived experiences of people who grew up inside those communities and are now slowly finding their voice. Including me. I am Sarah. I am from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and this is my story.